Okay, so if you don't already know me, I'm Angela Castillo-Epps, and I do work alongside Cheryl Matney to do technical assistance for all the councils. For today, though, this presentation, this webinar and discussion is more of a member services. So the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities member services group is bringing this to you today. So I'm just going to talk real quickly about how this came about, just to introduce us, and then I will turn it over to our first presenters. So councils are looking for ways to continue to embed cultural and linguistic competence, kind of those concepts in the work that they do. And just in a nutshell, those are concepts that help councils support individuals with developmental disabilities and their families from diverse cultural backgrounds. And that can include so many different things, ethnicity and geographic location and gender identity. I mean, just so many other social factors go into speaking English as a second language. So all these things to say that, councils have always worked in this space. You always have. The definitions of minority participation and cultural competency, they're in the DD Act, right? So councils have always worked in this space. But recently, we've wanted to see, we've been hearing more about councils wanting to know, well, how do I track this work? How do I make sure it's happening? How do I report on it? And that is one of your PPR requirements, is to address how the council is incorporating cultural and linguistic competence in their state plan activities, or how are their state plan activities reaching diverse cultures, right? So with that being said, we did find out through the grapevine that a couple of councils had developed or modified some of their assessment tools to look at these factors. And then when other councils heard about it, they immediately said, hey, do a webinar on that. And there was a lot of interest. As you can see, there were 35 people on the call and over 50 registered. So we wanted to bring together today for you two councils. We have Kirsten Murphy and Max Barrows from Vermont. And then we also have Executive Director Erica McFadden from Arizona. And it's going to be great because they each have a tool, and the concept is the same, but the audience is a little different, or maybe the uses are a little different. So we would love to have them talk to you today a little bit about their process. How did it come about? And how do they use it? What do they think? And then we're going to open it up to our DICLC work group folks. I do see some of you on the list here, just to see if the work group has anything to share. I mean, we have councils that are really doing a lot of work in this area. And then open it up, of course, to all of you. If you have questions, if you have comments, if there's still some needs, let us know. We're happy to hear from you. As you know, you have the chat box. That might be easy with such a big group. Feel free to use the chat box as well, and I'll do my best to manage that. And if there are no pressing questions, I think we'll get started. Everybody good? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten and Max to take it away. Let me put you good for the presentation now?
Yeah, that would be great. If you'd go ahead and put the title slide on there, that would be great. Hi, it's nice to see everybody this afternoon. I, of course, recognize many of you. I'm Kirsten Murphy. I'm the Executive Director here in Vermont. And then I'm joined by my colleague, Max. Max, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Max, and I work for Green Mountain Self-Advocates, and we work together on a lot of projects and stuff, partnering with the Vermont DD Council. I am Outreach Director for our statewide disability rights self-advocacy organization here in Vermont.
Thanks, Max. That's great. Yep. And Max and I both sit on a community of practice in Vermont for cultural and linguistic competence, which is part of the the roots of this particular project. So if we could just go to the next slide. Quick overview. I'm just going to give you a little background about why we took up this particular project. Then Max is going to share some of the details of how Green Mountain Self-Advocates did some very focused work on creating a measurement device that is in plain language for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how we plan to use the tool going forward. So if we could just go to the next slide. I'm going to just do a little bit of background here. So back in 2017, a number of states received technical assistance grants from ACL. These were 5-year grants. They didn't come with money, but they came with a lot of wonderful technical assistance from the National Center for Cultural Competence at Georgetown. Every year we were able to get some really high quality training from Georgetown. And then throughout the year, each state team, which Max and I sat on, Vermont's state team, got some technical assistance to help us develop a work plan for Vermont that would describe ways we were going to make our state bring more greater cultural and linguistic competence to developmental services. And for full disclosure here, in Vermont, we had our work cut out for us from the get-go, since we rival Maine as the whitest state in the country. It kind of flips back and forth between Maine and Vermont. Not that white people don't also have a culture, but we definitely had some interesting conversations about what that, what cultural competence meant in the particular context of Vermont, which has a very diverse and interesting new American community, actually. So when we first came together as a community of practice, we had, of course, our statewide self-advocacy organization, which Max works for, and a couple self-advocates representing them. The DD Council, our Protection and Advocacy group, our USAID. We had folks from Independent Living and from our statewide family support organization as well. And then one of our agencies especially because it was an agency that had done a lot of work with some of the new American communities in Vermont. And I know I felt, at the beginning of this project, each of us kind of pledged that along with the work of transformation in Vermont, we were going to start with transformation of our own organizations. And I felt pretty challenged to sort of figure out where I would begin. I was a pretty new executive director. Where would I begin to even think about changing my council in a way that would make it, more culturally and linguistically competent? How did I even get started? So at my very first training session down at Georgetown, I learned about this very, I would say, sophisticated tool that the folks at Georgetown had created. Their cultural and linguistic competence assessment for disability organizations. You see a little picture of it there with the guideline. There's a separate set of guidelines. And I thought, okay, well, here's a great way to take an inventory of our organization. And so I looked at, I picked that up and I looked through it and I began to get myself sort of, ready to try that out. And I thought, wow, this looks pretty long. Let's not try it with my whole council. Let's just get the executive committee together. And we go to the next slide. Let's, kind of take it for a test drive, if you will. And, I can't say enough good things about Georgetown's tool. It's very comprehensive. It's very well done. It is the gold standard. But if we could go to the next slide, alas, even though it was the gold standard, we pretty quickly hit a tree. It did not go well when I worked with my executive committee. We got through the whole tool and we learned a lot. But we did also notice along the way that it was long and it was really challenging for family members and self-advocates to use a tool that was, had a pretty challenging vocabulary. just a couple of example words: disproportionality, reciprocal transfer of knowledge. I think, I guess when we did a reading level screen, it was something like 13.5 grade levels or something. It was pretty high. We also felt like it had an awful lot of abstract ideas embedded in this inventory. So I'm not able to read my full slide here, but I pulled a little clip there. Recognizes the perceptions, and someone's going to have to tell me the hidden word here, something about disability or culturally defined.
Beliefs.
Thank you. Perceptions and beliefs about disability are culturally defined. It really required a fair amount of abstract thinking. That was challenging for some folks on my executive committee. And sometimes when we had to rate things, it really asked us to think about very subtle shades of difference. So I'm not sure what the difference between sometimes and routinely. Somebody asked me to explain that. I wasn't quite sure. It was really comprehensive. It asked us to look at every aspect of our organization. Who sat on the council? What were our personnel policies? How did we use our money? Did we have money set aside for language interpretation? Did we reach out to communities of color when we were, doing our statewide needs assessment? It really, went through every possible aspect of what our organization did, and that was wonderful. But it just was a tool that I couldn't see bringing to my full council without translating it into something a little more understandable. So that's where Max and Green Mountain Self Advocates came in. I'll let you talk about that a little, Max.
Thanks, Kristen. So I'm just gonna go over, here's a brief summary of what we did at Green Mountain Self Advocates. We took an assessment tool and rewrote it into plain language for members in our organizations to understand. Of course, it is vital that they are able to contribute to the making GMSA more culturally competent. So the first thing we did was we used what is known as readable.com to figure out what reading level is for the original questions. And when we did that, it scored 13.7 grade level. Next, we put together a chart with 2 columns, which you will see on the next slide. And we put the original questions on the left of the chart, and what is on the right of the chart is what we came up with in terms of rewording, the questions that were asked. Third, and this is kind of a recommendation, work with a team of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to rewrite questions. It is what we did here at GMSA. Myself and 2 other colleagues and self-advocates of mine did that. Next, use the thesaurus in Children's Writer's Word Book. It's a book where is used to find words below 6th grade level. So when we want to use a word, but we think it might be too difficult, we look it up to check what grade level the word is, and if it's above 6th grade level, the book gives us other options. So that's the 4th. The 5th thing is for the whole entire process, we use the Green Mountain Self Advocates 2-page checklist with tips on how to write and format information in plain language. Number 6, when you have a draft, use readable.com to check grade level of adapted text and aim for 6th grade level. That's what we did. Number 7, add pictures. It's good to add pictures, and we purchase photos and graphics from istock.com, and they have, you know, the most photos of people with developmental disabilities. Or get pictures from for free from unsplash.com, which is another photo website. Number 8, put together a focus group of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to review new documents. We did this step with our board members here at Green Mountain Self-Advocates. When you do that, go through the document word for word to make sure people understand, which is what we did. And the last step, number 9, is we asked the people at Georgetown University who made the original tool to look at our version, and we went back and forth and made some corrections to get the content right. And finally, Georgetown agreed that we could say the GMSA tool was adapted with permission. So that is all the steps that we did. And on the next slide, this is just an example of our chart we use when coming up with plain language. I'm not going to go over it because we don't have the time. But if you like, you can email me if you have any questions. But just like on the left of the chart, like I said, it's like what was asked of us from Georgetown, and then how we reworded the question and made it more accessible and wrote it in a way where people understand is on the right of the chart and how it was in plain language. So yeah, that's what we did to make sure that people, our membership, people with disabilities in our organization contributed to know what's going on.
Thank you so much, Max.
Yeah.
So if we could just cut to the next slide, I'm going to kind of wrap this up. We are going to share this slide deck with you all, and GMSA embedded links to some of the resources Max just mentioned in the slide deck, so you'll be able to get them easily. So this was just, again, we mentioned that Georgetown has endorsed this product, and I want to say that was not an easy lift. This whole process took us a couple of years to actually develop this tool to a level where when we went, for a final side-by-side check, we knew that fidelity to the original instrument was absolutely there. Georgetown was comfortable with it and allowed it to be, printed and disseminated with their kind of blessing. Next slide, please. I just want to round this talk out by explaining, though, that a tool by itself is a tool. It has to get you somewhere, right? So what is the point of doing these inventories? Georgetown does strongly urge people to not lose sight of the overall project, which is to apply the tool. And they have a 4-phased kind of set of steps that they recommend one go through. And this is how my council's been pursuing using the new plain language tool, starting with establishing a structure, which is our executive committee, that's going to guide the work and kind of oversee the process, and also sort of demonstrate that leadership has strong buy-in to this transformational work on our council. Then some teaching at our council, so that mostly we have a shared vocabulary. There are some terms like cultural competency that did not get translated into plain language. Those terms need to be taught and explained. right? So there's some idea, you know, words are just so central to what you're trying to do that you need to do some teaching around what they are. And now we've kind of completed that phase, and we're just poised now. Of course, we have a 5-year plan to write. That's a little in the way, but we're poised to now do the data collection phase, where we use the plain language instrument. I think we're going to break into small groups to do it. We have we've agreed upon, you know, if 70% of the group answers yes, then we're going to consider that to be a yes. We have kind of a scoring agreement, and we're going to work through the tool. But most important of all, then we're going to take that data, summarize it, and come back together as a council and develop an action plan. So not our 5-year plan, but rather a smaller strategic set of steps that we'll be taking that, you know, are measurable over the next 3 years, that will bring our organization closer to that goal of cultural and linguistic competence. So if you just want to put the last slide up there, it's our contact information. So you'll have that in the slide deck too. And I know Max and I are always happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. It was extremely helpful to see the process. As Kirsten said, it's of course vital to follow through on that, to actually use the tool once you've went through all this work to develop it, and then have a process, have a plan for that as well. I love that you're doing it in small group. I love that you're taking on something that you can manage, something that's doable. Is very important. There's no need to have a 50-page plan, but you do something that meets your council's resources and your council's needs and funding and limitations. So sounds wonderful. We will definitely keep in touch with you to get some more feedback, you know, as you move through this process to kind of see how that's working for you and how the small group worked for you, and you know, learn more about what kind of a plan comes out of that. It's very exciting work. So thank you, Kirsten and Max. And before we move on to Arizona, any questions on what was just presented? And just a couple logistics real quick. I will send out this slide deck for you and the attachments again after this meeting. So no worries, you'll have everything you need. And of course, this is also being recorded, and we will post this to the NACDD website and let you know when and where that's available as well, just so everybody knows. So any questions for Max and Kirsten about this great information? And again, we're going to open up the discussion at the end as well. Okay. All right, great. Thank you again. Hearing none. Erica, if you're ready to talk to us about your piece, we'd be happy to have you.
Yes. All I have today to talk to you all about is the modified assessment tool. Angela, do I share it, or can you share it, or how do you want to do that? I don't have like a whole PowerPoint.
Oh, that's okay.
That's the tool itself.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I just made you co-host, so why don't you go ahead and try?
Okay.
And that sounds great.
And
I will pull it up as well.
Share. Let's see if this works. Can you guys see my screen?
Perfect.
Yay, first time. Okay. Well, thank you all for having me today. This is a very informal presentation, but I want to talk to you about cultural linguistic competency assessment, and that it doesn't have to be scary. It can be whatever works best for your council, as you can see here. We, like Kirsten and Max, we're also part of the Georgetown Community of Practice grant. And we also had the same, you know, the USETs. We have 2 USETs in Arizona. We have the DD network. We have the Parent Information Center and the Center for the PNA. So we all have been coming together starting back in, when was it, 2017. And we were looking, because we wanted to get a baseline of, you know, this is a 5-year grant, how far we've come in that 5 years. And we started looking around, just like Vermont did. What is out there that we can use for assessments? And we looked at the Colcato tool, because yes, you're right, that is the gold standard, but it's long. And when we looked at it, we were thinking, we're like, well, some of these, I mean, we can't tell the magnitude of the change we've had. So it's not qualitative. There's not like how questions or any of that, or what you did. So we realized that parts of that tool, so the parts that are quantitative, where you count the number of people on your board that are, fully or linguistically diverse, that's important, but we still need the how and the what to measure magnitude or the scope of change we've had. So we did this back when we just started. So this was like January. We developed it in the fall of 2017, and I think the final group started taking their first assessments in January of 2018. So we haven't done the final, because we're towards the end of the grant to be able to see what the outcomes were. But we're hopeful that we'll see a measurable change, and we can report that in our next 5-year plan and learn what worked and what didn't. But I developed the tool. So our group had already been meeting to determine where the biggest gaps were. When we first got the grant, Arizona has a large Spanish-speaking population here. We also have a large refugee community here. And we knew that many of our services weren't being accessible to people that speak different languages. So we wanted to focus on how we can, better serve those communities as a group. Like, we were all sharing the same challenges, interacting with this group. So what you'll see here are the questions that the group consistently, we all said, these are some things that we need to look at, not only internally. So this first section, building internal capacity, the internal capacity part, who we have as staff, who we have on our board, but we also need to look at how we're engaging with the community, and do we really know how they feel? I mean, do we have ways to find out what they think about you? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? Right, and so, so we added that part, and then this last part, the evaluation measuring success. These are all like the quantitative numbers that people are interested in, to see if you've had, how many are on your board, how many staff are culturally linguistically diverse, how many linguistically diverse communities utilize your services. Do you have data to be able to track that? So these were some of the things that they had looked at, and we had actually looked at a bunch of tools. Culture was one. We had I actually had a research students go look to see what else was out there. They're really, really, we just did pull from what was relevant to what we were doing from that Colcato tool. And the group basically decided these were the top areas that they were concerned about. And what I can tell you is that if you look at some of the questions, like not just like the number of people that are on your board that are linguistically or culturally diverse, but how do you recruit for your positions if you have a position open? I mean, do you actually go talk to the communities that this is open? Do you send it to the right organizations? It's not just the number, it's how you're doing it. So that's what we were focusing on throughout this whole 5-year grant, we're looking at the outcomes, the process to get there. And so you'll see in these questions, the trainings that you had. So we wanted to know what kind of trainings you got, and then what the names of them were, so that we can share them with each other. We wanted to know what your anti-discrimination policy was, because some of the people in our group might have had stronger policies than others. We want to know what they were. So these are just a couple things. And I think that, Angela, did you send it out ahead of time so the group has a copy of this?
Yes, the group has a copy of this, and the group also has a copy of the Vermont tool, but I'm going to send them again after this webinar, along with the slides. So everybody will have everything that they need. I don't know if you can zoom a little bit on your tool.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
that's okay.
Yeah. Let's see if I can.
Just a little bit. I mean, and you're right. They should have that in the email. They can pull it up through their email as well.
Yeah.
But it just,
okay.
I love the tool because it's short and it's so to the point. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't supposed to scare people. I mean, honestly, people are so afraid of assessments. I mean, what Vermont did was amazing. And I really appreciate that. And we'll probably use your tool as well, because it's been, you know, you guys went through a lot of work to make sure it was, you know, academically sound. This was really just an informal, honestly. If this isn't to scare people, you guys can develop based on your group. You can create your own informal assessment. But I think what's important is, and I'm talking because I'm a PhD, okay? And I do care about academic soundness of things. But when it comes to, as a council, determining where you want to go, where you want to be, making sure that everybody's on the same page as to how to get there, and that you have measures in place to do that. It does not have to be, you know, perfect, but as long as you're able to use that tool. And all the people in our group, we all filled this out at the very beginning. And so now we're going to go back, probably the grant's over the summer, I believe. So we're probably going to go back like in June to see how far we've come and what changes need to be made. So, so these are just some of the questions we had, and we're also going to be able to, at the end, go back and find out, you know, are there other areas we should have been looking at that we need to include moving forward? And I have to say that throughout this whole thing, throughout the 5-year grant that Georgetown did with us, when I watched, they were able to offer us some amazing resources that are available on their site. But I have to say that there is, any state can do what we did, because of the fact that if you can just have a group, your DD network come together, maybe with a DD state system or whoever that's focused on cultural linguistic competency, and you guys meet regularly, you can make change. If you all come to the table, same page, this is what we're going to evaluate, these are the problems, and then come up with a plan together. You don't necessarily have to have a grant to do that. So I just wanted to just put this informal presentation out there, this tool, and you can tweak it to however you want to. We found that this works for us because that's what we look at when it looks at if we're making a difference. But we encourage you to do something similar, and maybe even use it as a discussion, even if you don't have a Georgetown grant, to be able to approach your DD network to figure out how you can develop a more culturally linguistically competent system. So right. That's just that's my little spiel for today. I don't know if I answered all the questions, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
No, Erica, that's extremely helpful. I love your idea of partnering, and that it doesn't have to be this huge formal process. It can be what works for your council and maybe for your partners as well. Doing it, you know, in conjunction with other groups is a great way to kind of learn from each other. And I love how you kept it open for growth. You know, you're going to evaluate it and come back to it. That's what you do. You know, it's a tool. And culture ebbs and flows, just like with political changes, administration changes, immigration populations, you know, so many things impact kind of, you know, culture in general. It is not something that you do once and you check the box. It's something that evolves, and it's a continuum, and councils are in all different places on that continuum, especially since it's 56 of you, and not only are all the states different from each other, but the states are different from the territories, and then even all the territories are also very different from each other, right? So culture really is a unique thing. So I just thought that was so helpful. Thank you so much, Erica. We would love to keep in touch with you about your tool as well as you've moved forward. If you add to it, if you take away from it, you know, keep us updated. It's great information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions for Erica's piece before we open up to discuss?
I think Tedra Jackson had a question.
Tedra did have a question, I think, in the chat.
So Tedra, so yeah, so back when this initially came out, I shared it with Wendy Jones and the community practice, and she liked it. The thing is that it's not, if you look at the Colcado, it is totally different. I don't even know if, I mean, it was inspired by the Colcado, but the questions are not anything remotely like it. So I don't even think I don't even necessarily think it needed to have their blessing, because it's so different. I just want to give credit that the inspiration came from Georgetown. So just keep in mind that you probably just need to change that word adapted. You know, this actually took a life of its own on because we shared it with Wendy Jones and a small group of the Georgetown people, and she was good with it. But now it's like kind of weird. So I probably do need to take out the adapted, but when you say for more information about fuller assessments, go to call Cato. So I appreciate your question.
Yeah, always find a reference that, yeah, no problem. But yeah, the idea of making something your own, and then how do you go about that? You know, who should you bring to the table? You saw that Kirsten's group brought Green Mountain Self Advocates. You know, who do you need to bring to the table to look into something like this for your council? So great, thank you. Any other questions or anyone from our DICLC work group that's on that would like to just add to the discussion? We'd love to hear from you.
This is Jackie from New York. I'll just say I'm really excited to see these tools. I remember we actually have like a cultural competency page on our website. And when it was reviewed for readability, it was like the most complicated page because of a lot of the terms that were on it. So I do think, and it's really important that these concepts are conveyed, and it's really important work. So I think doing the work to like adapt it into plain language so that everyone can engage is really, really good.
Yeah, the tool, I think that the Vermont tool especially is definitely something that could be used by self-advocacy organizations to help increase their cultural competence, to help increase their diversity among the advocates that they're supporting. It's you know, do the advocacy groups, does everybody in the advocacy group look like everybody else? You know, and again, we talked a little bit about outreach and engagement. Erica talked about the recruitment process, so important. That's part of that engagement. Who are you engaging? You know, who are you leaving out? No, all great stuff there. And yes, of course, on top of everything else, you know, we always need to have accessibility in the back of our minds, right? Is the information accessible, right? So
I just think using the tool, and you know, and I've watched, you know, Green Mountain, you know, use in different iterations as they were trying it out, test driving it or whatever, you know, just having the conversation becomes a way of welcoming everyone in. Like it helps just, you know, everybody learning together just helps move you further along that continuum as a group. And so that dynamic has been just, I mean, yes, you want to come up with a plan, but the activity of going through the tool also has benefits just in terms of kind of the conversation it sparks and the way it gets people to really talk with one another and, you know, and begin to break down some of the it's the barriers, but that they aren't really even speaking about between each other. And so I think that's just been a really healthy thing to watch organizations.
Yeah, and I think even you and I, Kirsten, talked too about it's such a good things to think about. You know, you read over these questions and you're like, never thought of that, or never thought about it in that way, right? So it's just an excellent, you know, starter for that, like you said, for that conference, but even just for yourself, just to think of things. Go ahead, Matt.
And I wanted to add too about the conversation is like it really does a good deed in participation because of course it engages people more, where you're not just talking at them so much too, and then you're also making the environment kind of feel like it's sort of like, you know, kind of like, hey, you know, this is kind of like we just want to have a talk with you in a way that's not feeling like you're being tested or you know, you have to know everything. It's just, you know, setting the environment to feel like, you know, we just want to have a talk with you and just, in a way that's not as, intimidating, lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that everybody knows that you're working toward that inclusion.
Yeah.
You want to be included, and again, when you
Role
look at
model.
something like this,
Mhm.
yeah, it gives you that things to think about that then, can provide some kind of basis for, well, how can we be more inclusive? Because that's what this really is about. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Max.
Yeah, this is Erica, and I just wanted to add to what they just said. That evaluation tool, that is so true that it is used as a way to understand cultural linguistic competency. The full Colcado tool will actually tell you everywhere it goes. But I found, like, at least in Arizona, and it might be similar in your states, we have our Medicaid agencies evaluate vendors. They have to be culturally linguistic competent. But how they measure that is just, do you have formats available in different languages of your policies and procedures? Like, there's very little that is required of vendors. And so now our next step as a group, even when Georgetown goes away, is how we can work with the vendors. And I even reached out to Georgetown a few months ago, and I didn't get a response back, but finding an assessment tool for the vendors, because they don't even know. They check that they are, but then our deaf community is left out of services. They think that if the deaf community knows how to sign, like if they know how to sign that they have to go to the bathroom, or if that's good enough. Like, they have access to services, and that's against the ADA. And so trying to get a tool out there to get to Max's point, to get people, not just self-advocacy organizations, but get the disability serving organizations that serve our people, more like, this is less, less scary for them. It's less overwhelming, and how they can possibly do that and make it more bite-sized, instead of them saying it's just knowing how to say the word, go to the bathroom. That's what we're looking at next. So, and the evaluation tool is the perfect way to do that, because then they know how we're measuring success, right? So that's the kind of conversations and I think we're going to have our first training in like two months, I think, is the next step, to have that training with providers and discuss on how they can evaluate that.
Right. And I think that's an excellent example of councils being leaders. You're leaders, you're educators. And that's such a perfect example, Eric, of how to spread this information out. Think about what that education does. I mean, that opens up the window for so much more to be provided in that inclusive and competent manner. You're opening the window up to that by sharing the information, by educating on the information. So that's wonderful. Excellent point to get with vendors and others that support community, right? Because of course this is something that we should all be looking at. And great point too, that there again, like we said, that there's a continuum, right? So you have somebody that says, well, I already printed that in Spanish, and that's it, right? But that's why it's nice to look at these tools, because you'll see, oh, well, there's more, and again, I love the bite size. You don't have to do it all at once, right? This work takes time. You have to take your time to see, what you can manage and what's important to, to the state or territory that you're serving, that you're supporting. Great. Okay, so we do have one question in the chat. Is any group using this tool and coupling it with trauma-informed care organizations? And change and implicit bias training to support effective management. So I'm not sure how far along Arizona and Kirsten are with their tools.
Yeah, not there yet, but those are great. Those are great directions to go. I mean, that's a really good suggestion. We haven't tried that yet, but
I think we're doing it but unintentionally, because we have been, and over the last 5 years, last 3, becoming more trauma informed as an organization. And so when we look at the tool again in the next month or two, looking at how we've changed, and maybe those open-ended questions will reflect those trauma informed approaches we're now taking. That's exactly why I'm saying that we should have some qualitative questions in any of these assessments we do so that we can start tracking that if we start adopting those trauma-informed or implicit bias trainings and these type of tools, and then adding to them as we see like what's working, what we should be paying attention to. These are all like, these tools, they should work for you and they should be responsive to what your needs are. That's the beauty of some of these assessment tools.
Yeah. Great point. Great question. Thank you. Anybody else have something to share? This is your time.
Yeah.
It's your time. You have a lot of great people on here. Questions, ideas?
I sort of have a question. You probably already covered this, and I was probably fading, but Georgetown, that's not in Vermont, I know. Did you
No.
guys have that in both cities? That's what confused me at first, was I thought it was the Vermont only.
No, Georgetown University is down in Washington, D.C.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then,
Okay.
yeah, and then DR, they also have a National Center for Cultural Competence. And I share personally a lot of their information with councils, and they have presented a lot of cool opportunities to learn about this topic through community of practices and leadership academies. And so that's kind of where some of this stuff comes from. But yes, it's also a Georgetown University initiative. It's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. So Erica just put the National Center for Cultural Competence website in the chat box. And of course, I can send that out to you in your follow-up email as well. No problem.
I know it looks like Tanya has offered, she's exploring a trauma-informed organizational change we can use internally, and she will share if it goes well. So yeah, I hope that you will keep the group posted about that. That would be really interesting.
Yes, that would be great. Anybody else?
This is Emily from Idaho Council. I just wanted to, we actually had the opportunity, sorry, I have a 3-year-old and I thought he was being quiet. Anyway, we actually had the opportunity to have a really great, I think it was like 4 or 5 month seminar meetings every month about cultural competency. And you're right, it's so much information. And it's so mind-boggling. And when you're trying to make decisions on what's next and what's the first step, it's kind of like you have to sift through all of this. So this information has been great. I'm excited to really get into it a little bit deeper and look at all of the slides, like even more. And then, so thank you for this opportunity. It's going to be great. I love that we are all collaborating on a national level. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Glad we could inspire. And the ITAC website, a lot of you are familiar with the ITAC website. The ITAC website also has a DICLC button at the top. And there are there's some great information in there as well. We do refer to that quite a bit. I also write a DICLC column in the Field Notes newsletter each month as well. And I'm always filling stuff up in there related to this topic. I've been doing it every month for about 6 years. So there's a lot of information there. So it's definitely available to councils. I think we keep 3 years worth of Field Notes archived on the ITAC website. So you can always check out that column if you want to catch up on information related to this topic. That's also another way to do it. So thank you for sharing, Emily. Anybody else for questions or comments for our presenters or for each other?
Hi, Angela. This is Jermaine.
Hi.
Hey, Jermaine.
Good morning from Guam, everyone.
Yeah.
Friday morning. The territory. So there's a lot of helpful information that I've heard from all the different councils stateside, and a lot of it is the larger cultural groups, right? Latin, the Hispanic groups, right? But do you know of any studies, or maybe someone here, anyone on the call can speak to any studies or any any work that has been done in terms of Micronesian communities. I remember when we were in Arkansas for the executive directors leadership summit. I remember them speaking about reaching out to a Marshallese. They have a large Marshallese population, and I know there are some other states with larger Micronesian populations, but I haven't been able to locate or have any large studies or bigger or larger scale studies about that, because we do have a few of representatives from the Micronesian population on our council, but it seems like the only ones that we're able to reach out to are those in our council, right? Because I guess because of cultural practices in their own countries, they are very hesitant and almost like they won't even discuss any sort of disability issues within their family or within their communities. And I've been, just always thinking of how we can more effectively reach out to them. Just even just past the language issues, but trying to be more relatable to them so that they can open up and they can contribute to some of the discussion we're having. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any resources that they know of for a larger scale way to reach out to like my other smaller populations.
Yeah, so Jermaine, I can definitely look into that for you. I think maybe even Arkansas would be a good good contact for you. They have been working in that space for a while, for I think throughout this last 5-year state plan. So that may be another contact for you. I actually have a data meeting tomorrow, so I may be able to actually, I will ask for you because it'll be a great perfect opportunity for me to see. As you know, it's very hard to get territory data. I do have I do have data contacts that I reach out to regularly for councils. I'm always advocating for the territory data. So you know that can be difficult. But you kind of brought up a really good point that I also wanted to share. There are cultures that don't even have the term disability in their language. Okay. So if however Bobby was born, that's just who he is. It's not this child with a disability. And so when you look at that and you look at Western culture and you look at something like imposing services and supports to a culture that doesn't even have a word for disability, you have to really think of that, right? And so that may change your whole approach to working with that population, right? Yeah. So it's good to know, how does that culture perceive disability? Do they even perceive it at all? How do they look at the differences? I know that there are some cultures where they take, when someone's born with differences, they match them to a family member for life. And that family member is the caretaker for that person, for that individual. So the idea of something needed from the outside doesn't even register in the culture because they've actually already handled the situation. They've already paired up though. So, it's just such a great point. So I will look for more information for you. I don't know if anyone else on the call has additional information, but I can definitely get back to you on that. And I can probably get you a contact for Arkansas as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. The reason why it comes up really is because I was in conversation with Daintree from Hawaii, and one of the things that's happening now is Medicare and Medicaid services are now being opened up to migrants who have come over to the states and territories under the Compact of Free Association, and now they're eligible to avail themselves of Medicaid and Medicare services. And one of the things when I spoke with our governor here was, because she's a nurse by trade, and she said this is going to be a game changer or a really big issue because now services that people in those communities had never sought out or now it's going to be readily available. And there's going to be so many things that are going to make the process more a lot slower, right? Is the language barriers and just people, they haven't kept up with their medical history. They don't have complete health records. And
Interesting.
right, so now it's opening up. I think the term they used was Pandora's box, because people who weren't necessarily seeking out these services for many years before now can do that. And these are people who are in the later stages of some of their medical problems, and people who had never sought medical services, right? I mean, that's really what it is. So I feel disability services are also going to be included in that, because like you said, Angela, a lot of these, they don't treat a disability as a disability, or they don't recognize it as a disability.
Right.
They just recognize it as just the person being the person.
Yeah.
And now they're going to have more resources available to them, and that's gonna really be something that's gonna come up in terms of financial struggles, right, or financial services.
Yeah, and you can really see where that education component's so important there, right? To be able to just like you were kind of saying, Jermaine, how do we make that inroad? How do we just let people know, hey, there's things out there, there's, and there are supports, so there are maybe things that can make things easier or better, and again, not to trample on anyone's culture, but just the idea of, opening up that dialogue and just letting them know what's available, right? So yeah, great point. And I think we have a question from Keith as well.
Keith, yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Keith. I work for the DD Council in Maryland, and I will preface my question by saying I've been in this space for about a year. I was a senior policy writer on the state level for 15 years before that, so my brain is a policy brain. I don't think it's going to change at this point. So my question is, when I was in my policy world, the first and last question was always, so what? So we spend 100 grand, we engage with some consultant, we develop or modify a tool, we ID our populations, we somehow reach out to them, whether it's through intercultural brokers or some mechanism. And then what? Right? So we've ID'd the people, we've ID'd the organizations, we know that they've got 3% diversity on their board, we know that they've got 88% diversity on their board, and we've got a population that we've driven towards services or towards information or towards fellowship or towards whatever it is that they need. But so what, right? What's the measure? What's the outcome? What's the measurable? And it's a question, not an accusation.
I'm going to let Eric has a very big, smart academic brain come up with a great answer. I'm just going to give a knee-jerk response. So when Vermont reaches a place where, regardless of what culture a community is, they are accessing services all at an equivalent rate and meeting the needs of the individuals in their population, so that people are reaching our human services goals of being as healthy as possible and enjoying a high quality of life, then I think we probably have gotten there. And until we get there, we're going to keep trying to figure out how to reach out to the populations that are disproportionately not accessing the services that we're making available, because there's something wrong with how we're offering them or the service itself. And until we can get that right, that, we've got kids in our community of new Americans that are growing up without the same access if they have, say, speech challenges, without the same access during the same important developmental periods to acquire as much communication skill as possible. So when everybody's getting that, then I'll be there. Thank you for the question, though, Keith.
And Keith, and this is Erica, speaking from as a policy wonk myself, that's actually my focus is policy. And I can tell you that the so what, so, the state, we always say, that it's just equitable. It's the whole health disparities thing that Kirsten was just talking about. But also, a lot of states talk about the money cost of it, because we don't want people going in the emergency room. We don't want people, costing our state money, but really it's just the right thing to do, making sure that our population has access to services. So if you do, like the states do with policy, right, and community developing policies for communities, they do needs assessments. So when we did the needs assessment, we determined the gaps when it came to actually engaging with these communities to be able to ensure they have equitable access. We found that the gaps were in these areas that we highlighted on our assessment. And so really, if we start looking at those areas of our assessment when it comes to how we engage with the community, how we know that they're getting what they need and everything, and implementation and evaluation and planning, like if we have measures in place to engage, to measure all that, then we know we're going to be effective, because then we can monitor over time if our community is getting access to services like everybody else. So it's really addressing the disparity. It's all, I know it's like, and it's like looking at, so what? Like looking at your processes to make sure that those people are getting there, getting equitable access.
Yeah.
Yes, you're both awesome. That was exactly, my brain just needed it. I was in the same place. I just needed to hear it articulated. And I think that's a really powerful point in the conversation to say, this is where you're landing, right? So you can take your state, you can take your populations, your variables, your challenges, your service gaps, right? And fill them using this, right? I just needed it to.
Thank you for the question. It's a really important one.
This is Emily. Can I just add something else? I'm a parent of an individual with developmental disability, but I look at this in a different light, even more. I look at this and I think, if we can give the access to the services they need, these individuals are going to get the access they need. They're going to get the care that they need. They're going to understand how to advocate for themselves. And then you have everyone, every culture and every disparity being able to advocate, and hopefully it changes globally, right? Like I just look at it even bigger, and maybe that's too big. I mean, I know we have a long ways to go with that, but if my child is going to learn, grow, and become an adult and to advocate for herself, I hope she is also helping others do that, and also understanding cultural competency better than I did at this age. And it goes forth, just on and on. And that's where I see the big picture. And we have to continue to work on it, or it's not going to keep going.
I agree. This is Dion,
Totally agree.
Idaho. I just agree that there's so many different types of people, cultures, ethnicities, LGBT, race, everything, and we can't help everyone at once. We have to take stepping stones, and I feel that we can eventually reach our goal, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, even when Jermaine brought up the idea of, new immigrant populations coming on board. So the work is a little bit never ending. Yes. I mean, so it's okay. It's okay. And also to Emily's point, Keith, we're just not going to change. We're not going to stop until we change the world. So, we have, we got each other. So, and it also made me think of, too, that unserved, underserved piece of the TANF Act, that's in there for this reason, right? And so, and as people grow, their needs change, and Emily touched on that a little bit too. So, are our kids ready to learn at the same rates? And then once they are, well, what about secondary education? What about college life? And then if not, what about employment? And then what about the advocacy leaders that we need to carry this work on? What about their advocacy growth, right? So as you go through your life continuum, you need more and more, and we are all about making sure that access is there so that person can continue to grow. and kind of be a part of this whole community. So hopefully that helped. I thought that was great. But
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
yeah, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. This has been really something. Okay, it's after 5 here, and also Keith, welcome to Maryland. I was with the Maryland Council for over 8 years, so welcome.
Though I take
Thank
it from
you.
your accent, you might not be from Maryland.
Not originally. I became an American citizen 2 years ago. I grew
Oh,
up in England.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Great.
Came at the right time.
Things are getting better.
Trying, yes.
We're trying.
Ryan, anybody else, any final thoughts or needs? And so I'm going to send you the follow-up email with all this information. And then please, if you have like other needs or other questions, feel free to email me back. I'm happy to help with anything I can, but I will get the slides out to you, the documents one more time, a couple links, and look for that. I'll send it out now. And oh, and then when the recording is ready, again, we will make sure it gets posted to the NACDD website, and we can try to send that out to you through the email as well. So
Thanks so
again,
much for coming today. It's been really nice to talk with everyone.
Kirsten and
Thanks
Matt.
so much. Great to see everyone.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Bye.
Be well.
All right. Take care.
Bye.